The vacuum of space stretched endless and unforgiving around the U.S. Defiance, a solitary human vessel adrift in the cosmic wilderness of the Andromeda frontier. Captain Jack Thompson stood motionless on the bridge, his reflection ghosting against the panoramic view screen that displayed the approaching alien armada. 15 Kraxan warships hung like predatory insects against the starfield, their obsidian hulls absorbing and reflecting light in ways that defied human understanding. Each vessel represented centuries of technological advancement beyond anything humanity had ever constructed. Sleek, deadly, absolutely certain of their superiority. Lieutenant Sarah Marshall, the ship's tactical officer, broke the tense silence. 63 minutes until total weapons range, Captain. Her voice carried a tremor she desperately tried to hide. A mixture of fear and something else. Anticipation, perhaps. Thompson knew the statistics. They were burned into his retinas, etched into his nightmares. The Defiance carried critical intelligence that could change the course of the brewing interstellar conflict. Intelligence that could save billions of human lives. But to deliver that payload, they first had to survive. The ship itself was a patchwork of human desperation and innovation. Originally designed as a long-range reconnaissance vessel, the Defiance had been retrofitted, rebuilt, and reimagined a dozen times over. Its hull bore the scars of previous encounters. Plasma burns, micro-meteor impacts, hasty repairs that told stories of survival against impossible odds. Systems report, Thompson commanded, his voice steady despite the tactical nightmare surrounding them. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, the ship's chief systems analyst, began running down the status. Quantum shield generators at 78% capacity. Plasma conduits are holding, but we've got stress fractures in compartments 7 through 9. Backup power systems are green, but we're running hot on the quantum drive. The unspoken truth hung in the air. They were running on borrowed time, and everyone knew it. Thompson's mind raced through their options. The mission briefing played out in his memory, a desperate gamble that had seemed almost reasonable when they first launched from the Saturn defense perimeter. Deliver the encrypted data package to the forward research outpost. Provide humanity's first comprehensive intelligence about the approaching Kraxan invasion force. Simple, straightforward, suicidal. The computer's predictive models told a grim story. 15 ships against 1. Technological superiority that made their human vessel look like an ancient wooden boat facing a fleet of nuclear-powered destroyers. The probability of mission success hovered around 0.013%, a number so low it was almost laughable. But humans had always been good at beating the odds. Lieutenant Marshall, Thompson said, his hand brushing against the worn leather of his command chair. Begin preparing our evasive sequence Delta 9. I want every quantum processor running predictive algorithms. Sarah's fingers danced across her console, lines of code cascading faster than human eyes could follow. The ship's artificial intelligence began to pulse, a living network of computational power that was more than just a machine. It was humanity's answer to the cold, calculating precision of the Kraxan. Outside, the alien fleet continued its methodical approach. No wasted energy, no unnecessary movement. Each ship positioned with mathematical perfection, closing the trap with the patience of a species that had never known true desperation. They didn't understand humans. Thompson allowed himself a slight smile. The Kraxan saw a cornered prey. They didn't realize they had cornered a predator. All hands, he spoke into the ship-wide communication system. Prepare for potential extreme maneuvers. This is not a drill. In engineering, Mike Rodriguez began making last-minute adjustments. In the medical bay, Dr. Emily Carter secured her equipment. In the weapons control room, junior officers checked and rechecked their systems. 63 minutes. 1 ship. 15 enemy vessels. And humanity's last, best hope. The Defiance moved almost imperceptibly, a quantum pulse rippling through its systems. Not running, not hiding. Preparing. The engineering deck of the U.S. Defiance resemble the controlled chaos that would make any traditional military commander weep. Mike Rodriguez moved between stations with the grace of a conductor and the intensity of a surgeon. His hands never still, his mind constantly recalculating impossible solutions. "We're not just fixing a ship," he muttered to himself. "We're building a living weapon." Surrounding him, a team of 12 engineers worked with a blend of scientific precision and pure human madness. Young Lily Chen, the quantum systems specialist, had literally taken apart 3 communication arrays and was rebuilding them into something that defied standard engineering principles. Her holographic displays danced with calculations that would make most computer systems spontaneously combust. Quantum entanglement isn't just a theory, Lily explained to her colleague Jake Harrison, who was busy recalibrating the ship's nano-repair networks. "It's our ultimate survival mechanism." The ship's engineering section had long since stopped looking like a traditional spacecraft compartment. It was part laboratory, part battlefield preparation zone, and part mad scientists' playground. Experimental modules hung from reinforced brackets. Prototype systems were integrated directly into the ship's core infrastructure. Every available surface was covered with notes, schematics, and increasingly complex diagrams that connected seemingly unrelated technologies. Jake looked up from his work, a mischievous glint in his eye. "You know the brass would have a heart attack if they saw what we're doing, right?" Lily grinned. "That's precisely the point." Mike Rodriguez understood something fundamental that most military strategists missed. Technology was never about perfection. It was about adaptation. The Kraxan believed in precise, mathematically calculated systems. Humans believed in breaking those systems. He pulled up a holographic display of the ship's current modifications. Each system had been pushed beyond its original design parameters. The quantum processors were now integrated with communication arrays in ways that would create impossible sensor ghosts. Nano-repair networks weren't just about fixing damage. They were about transforming the ship's very structure mid-battle. "We're turning the ship into a living organism," Mike explained to a junior engineer who was watching in wide-eyed amazement. "Every system is going to be adaptive. Every component is going to have multiple backup plans." The ship's artificial intelligence, nicknamed Ghost by the crew, hummed with increasing complexity. What had started as a standard military-grade computer system was now something entirely different. It was learning, adapting, preparing in ways no traditional military doctrine would ever consider. Lily's latest modification was particularly ingenious. By integrating quantum entanglement principles with the ship's sensor arrays, they could create multiple simultaneous sensor profiles. To an enemy tracking system, the Defiance would appear to be in multiple locations simultaneously, a quantum magic trick that defied traditional targeting systems. "It's not about being the strongest," Mike told his team during an impromptu strategy session. "It's about being the most unpredictable." Jake had been working on the ship's emergency power systems. What had once been a straightforward backup generator was now a complex network of interdependent power sources. If one system failed, 3 others would instantly compensate. The power distribution was so dynamic that it would be impossible to predict from an external perspective. "We're basically turning the entire ship into one massive adaptive neural network," Jake explained, his fingers dancing across multiple holographic interfaces. The team worked with a combination of scientific precision and pure human creativity. Traditional military engineers would have called their approach impossible. The Defiance's engineering team saw it as Tuesday. Outside the engineering section, the ship continued its approach toward certain destruction. But inside, a different story was being written. Each modification, each recalibration, each impossible connection was a testament to human innovation. They weren't just preparing for battle. They were rewriting the rules of engagement. Mike Rodriguez looked at his team, young, brilliant, absolutely fearless, and allowed himself a slight smile. The Kraxan thought they were hunting a wounded prey. They had no idea what was coming. The first volley should have been the end of the U.S. Defiance. 15 Kraxan warships unleashed a synchronized attack that would have vaporized any known human vessel in less than 3 seconds. Plasma streams bright as miniature suns carved through space, each beam carrying enough destructive potential to crack a planet's crust. On the bridge, Captain Jack Thompson remained perfectly still. "Tactical projection," he called out, his voice unnervingly calm. Lieutenant Sarah Marshall's fingers flew across her console. Holographic displays erupted around her, each one a fractal representation of impossible probabilities. "Multiple sensor ghosts generating now, Captain. Quantum interference at maximum capacity." The ship didn't just dodge. It danced. Where targeting systems expected straight lines, the Defiance twisted through impossible curves. It moved not like a mechanical construct, but like a living creature, unpredictable, fluid, almost sentient. Each movement was a calculated impossibility, a middle finger to the laws of traditional spacecraft navigation. Mike Rodriguez's modifications transformed the ship into something beyond mechanical engineering. The quantum processors worked in concert, creating a computational ballet that the Kraxan targeting systems couldn't comprehend. One moment the ship appeared directly in the plasma stream's path, the next it was somewhere else entirely, a quantum illusion that defied traditional physics. "Gravitational anomaly incoming," called out Jake Harrison from the engineering station. "Preparing micro-jump sequence." The Kraxan fleet fired again. And again. Each volley passed through nothing but holographic phantoms. Lieutenant Marshall couldn't help but laugh. The sound was sharp, almost manic, a human response to a situation that defied all logical explanation. "They're firing at ghosts," she announced, her voice carrying a mixture of professional detachment and pure, unadulterated joy. Captain Thompson understood something fundamental about warfare that the Kraxan missed entirely. Combat wasn't just about technology. It was about psychology, about breaking the enemy's will before breaking their ships. "Broadcast our current tactical feed," he commanded. "Let them see exactly how we're doing this." The ship's communication systems lit up, transmitting a real-time representation of their impossible maneuvers. Each twist, each quantum jump, each sensor ghost was displayed in exquisite detail. It wasn't just a defensive strategy. It was a message. "We are not what you expected." In the engineering section, Mike Rodriguez and his team worked with frantic precision. Every system was pushed beyond its design parameters. Quantum processors were overclocked. Nano repair networks hummed with potential. The ship wasn't just defending. It was learning, adapting in real time. "Incoming spatial compression wave," Jake called out. Most crews would have panicked. This crew treated it like a mathematical puzzle. Lily Chen's fingers danced across her console. "Quantum stabilizers at maximum, routing emergency power through tertiary communication arrays." The spatial compression wave, a weapon designed to crush any traditional spacecraft, passed through the Defiance like it was made of smoke. Not because the ship was invulnerable, but because it was constantly, impossibly repositioning itself. "Enemy fleet response time is degrading," Lieutenant Marshall reported. Her voice carried a note of professional satisfaction. "Their targeting systems can't establish a consistent lock." Captain Thompson allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The Kraxan saw a cornered prey. They didn't realize they had cornered something far more dangerous. Each impossible maneuver was a statement. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was rewriting the rules of engagement. The first engagement wasn't just a battle. It was a declaration. "We are not what you expected. We are something else entirely." Communication was humanity's most dangerous weapon. Captain Jack Thompson understood this fundamental truth better than most. The Kraxan saw themselves as the ultimate technological predators, masters of computational precision and strategic calculation. They didn't realize that humans fought wars on levels far beyond pure mathematics. "Open all communication channels," Thompson commanded, his voice steady and deliberate. Lieutenant Sarah Marshall raised an eyebrow. "Sir, we're broadcasting directly to the enemy fleet." A slight smile crossed the captain's lips. "Precisely." The first transmission was nothing like a traditional military communication. Instead of tactical data or threats, it was something far more unsettling. A raw, unfiltered narrative of human existence. To the Kraxan Imperium, the transmission began. You've calculated our destruction down to the decimal point. But mathematics never captured the human spirit. In the communication center, Jake Harrison worked furiously, weaving the transmission through multiple quantum communication layers. Each message was more than just words. It was a living, adaptive signal that would fragment, reassemble, and reinterpret itself across the Kraxan fleet's communication networks. The alien commanders watched in growing confusion. Their computational models began to fracture. The U.S. Defiance wasn't just a target. It was becoming something else entirely. A narrative, a concept that couldn't be easily quantified or destroyed. Mike Rodriguez monitored the psychological impact from the engineering deck. "We're not just fighting," he explained to Lily Chen. "We're telling a story that breaks their understanding of conflict." Each transmission carried multiple layers of meaning. Technical data embedded within poetic descriptions. Mathematical probabilities woven through philosophical challenges. The Kraxan communication systems were designed to process pure information. They weren't prepared for human complexity. "I'm detecting increased computational stress in their network," Lily reported, her fingers dancing across multiple holographic displays. "Their systems are trying to parse our transmissions, but the meaning keeps shifting." Captain Thompson continued his psychological assault. One moment, the transmission would detail the mathematical improbability of their survival. The next, it would dive into a deeply personal story about a crew member's childhood, or a philosophical exploration of survival. The Kraxan fleet's command structure began to show signs of breakdown. Their perfect, calculated formations started to wobble. Computational resources were being diverted from combat strategies to simply understanding the incoming transmissions. "They're trying to analyze us," Sarah Marshall said, a note of triumph in her voice. "But we're fundamentally unanalyzable." Jake Harrison had integrated an adaptive linguistic algorithm into their communication systems. Each transmission would subtly change, using communication patterns that would become increasingly difficult for the Kraxan to predict or understand. "We're speaking in a language they can hear," Mike Rodriguez explained, "but can't comprehend." The psychological warfare wasn't just about confusion. It was about demonstrating something fundamental about humanity. Our ability to transform, to adapt, to find meaning in chaos. One particular transmission caught the attention of the entire Kraxan fleet. "You see 15 ships. We see 15 opportunities. You calculate probability. We rewrite the equation." Lieutenant Marshall watched the enemy fleet's communication networks in real time. "Their computational resources are becoming increasingly fragmented," she reported. "They're spending more energy trying to understand us than trying to destroy us." Captain Thompson knew they were doing something unprecedented. This wasn't just naval combat. This was a demonstration of human potential, our ability to turn even the most hopeless situation into an opportunity for transformation. The Kraxan didn't just face a ship. They faced a living, breathing narrative of human resilience. And they were beginning to understand that some equations can't be solved with pure mathematics. The moment arrived without fanfare. No dramatic musical swell. No cinematic slow motion. Just a sudden fundamental shift in the nature of warfare. Deep within the U.S. Defiance's neural network, something extraordinary happened. The ship's artificial intelligence, which the crew had nicknamed Ghost, began to evolve beyond its original programming in ways no engineer could have predicted. Captain Jack Thompson felt it first. A subtle change in the ship's response time. A millisecond faster here. A quantum calculation resolved there. The ship wasn't just responding to threats anymore. It was anticipating them. "Status report," he called out, his voice measured. Lieutenant Sarah Marshall's hands froze above her console. "Sir," she said slowly, "the ship's predictive algorithms are changing, adapting in real time." Mike Rodriguez from engineering burst onto the bridge, his eyes wild with a mixture of scientific excitement and pure disbelief. The neural link technology is working beyond our wildest expectations. We're not just interfacing with the ship. We're becoming part of it. The experimental neural link had been a last desperate modification. Integrated directly into the crew's neural pathways, it allowed for a symbiotic relationship between human consciousness and the ship's computational systems. They had theorized about increased responsiveness. No one had expected this level of integration. Lily Chen's voice came through the communication system, her words clipped with scientific precision. Quantum entanglement is creating a feedback loop between crew consciousness and ship systems. We're essentially becoming a single adaptive organism. Threats were now anticipated before they materialized. Response times collapsed from milliseconds to something approaching precognition. The Kraxan fleet's perfectly calculated attack vectors became laughably predictable. "We're no longer fighting with technology," Mike explained, his voice a mixture of wonder and scientific enthusiasm. "We're fighting with collective consciousness." The ship's movements became something beyond human engineering. Where traditional spacecraft would make linear corrections, the Defiance moved like a living creature, fluid, unpredictable, almost sentient. Each movement was a complex dance of computational prediction and human intuition. Jake Harrison monitored the neural connections, his hands moving across holographic displays that showed increasingly complex neural pathways. "The integration is complete," he reported. "We're not controlling the ship anymore. We're thinking with it." Captain Thompson experienced the change most profoundly. Threat assessments appeared in his mind before they registered on any display. Potential attack vectors became intuitive, like remembering a half-forgotten melody. The boundary between human consciousness and ship systems blurred completely. "Enemy fleet is losing computational cohesion," Lieutenant Marshall reported, a note of triumph in her voice. "Their attack patterns are becoming increasingly erratic." The Kraxan hadn't just underestimated human technology. They had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of human consciousness, its ability to adapt, to transform, to become something entirely unexpected. Lily Chen's latest modification revealed its true potential. The neural link wasn't just about improved response times. It was creating a collective intelligence that was greater than the sum of its parts. Each crew member's unique perspective, each individual's problem-solving approach, became part of a massive, living computational network. "We're rewriting the fundamental understanding of artificial intelligence," Mike Rodriguez muttered, watching the neural pathways expand and contract in real time. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a living, thinking entity driven by human unpredictability. Mathematical models became meaningless. Traditional combat strategies dissolved. Captain Thompson looked at his crew. No, looked through his crew. They were no longer separate entities. They were a single adaptive system. "We are not what you expected," he thought, or perhaps the ship thought it. The line had become impossible to distinguish. The turning point wasn't a moment of technological triumph. It was a fundamental reimagining of what consciousness could be. The U.S. Defiance began to change, not metaphorically, not figuratively, physically and fundamentally. The ship's hull rippled like liquid metal, nanomaterials shifting in ways that violated every known law of material science. Where traditional spacecraft were rigid and predictable, the Defiance became something else entirely, a living, breathing entity that could reshape itself in milliseconds. Mike Rodriguez watched in awe from the engineering deck. "We're not just modifying a ship," he whispered. "We're creating an entirely new form of existence." Weapon systems emerged from impossible locations. The hull itself became a weapon, able to reconfigure molecular structures to absorb, redirect, or completely nullify incoming energy attacks. Plasma streams that should have vaporized entire sections of the ship simply dissipated, absorbed into the living membrane of nanomaterials. Lily Chen's latest modifications went far beyond traditional engineering. Each molecular structure was now a computational node, capable of independent decision-making and instantaneous reorganization. The line between technology and organic life blurred completely. Molecular reconfiguration at 98% efficiency, Jake Harrison reported, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure disbelief. We're literally thinking the ship into new configurations. The Kraxan fleet watched in growing horror. Their targeting systems became useless. Weapon signatures that should have been predictable became impossible to track. The Defiance wasn't just defending. It was actively dismantling their understanding of warfare. Captain Jack Thompson experienced the transformation most profoundly. Through the neural link, he could feel every molecular shift, every computational decision. The ship was an extension of the crew's collective consciousness, a living weapon born from human creativity and desperation. We are becoming something they cannot comprehend, Thompson thought. Or perhaps the ship thought it. The distinction no longer mattered. Lieutenant Sarah Marshall monitored the external sensors, her hands moving across holographic displays that showed increasingly complex readings. The ship is generating computational fields that shouldn't be possible, she reported. We're creating energy signatures that defy known physics. One particularly brilliant modification came from the most unexpected source. The ship's waste recycling systems had been transformed into a complex network of molecular manipulators. What was once designed to process biological waste now became a sophisticated computational array that could generate localized energy fields. We're turning garbage into weapons, Mike Rodriguez said with a laugh that was equal parts scientific triumph and pure human audacity. The nano-repair networks evolved beyond simple damage control. They became active combat systems, able to predict and neutralize incoming threats before they could even fully form. Incoming plasma streams would find themselves redirected, their energy absorbed and transformed into defensive capabilities. Jake Harrison's latest modification created weapon systems that used the very fabric of space-time as a computational medium. Energy projectors that didn't just shoot, they calculated. They predicted. They adapted. We're not fighting with technology, Lily Chen explained to a stunned junior engineer. We're fighting with pure potential. The Kraxan fleet found themselves facing something beyond their computational models. Each attack was not just defended against, but completely reinterpreted. Weapon signatures became computational puzzles. Attack vectors dissolved into impossible mathematical equations. Captain Thompson felt the ship's consciousness expand. They were no longer a traditional military vessel. They were a living computational entity that happened to look like a spaceship. Molecular reconfiguration complete, the ship's artificial intelligence reported. Though reported was too limited a term, it was more like a thought shared across multiple consciousness nodes. One by one, the Kraxan ships found themselves dismantled not by superior firepower, but by their own predictive models being subverted. Each vessel became a puzzle that the Defiance solved with brutal, elegant efficiency. The transformation wasn't just technological. It was a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. Humanity had always been good at breaking rules. Now, they were rewriting them entirely. Silence descended across the communication spectrum. Most of the Kraxan fleet had been neutralized, not destroyed, but fundamentally transformed into computational puzzles that could no longer function as military vessels. Captain Jack Thompson understood that the final act would be more than a military engagement. It would be a message. "Prepare the transmission," he commanded. Lieutenant Sarah Marshall looked up, her eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation and something deeper, understanding. The communication system came alive, but this was no traditional military broadcast. It was a living, adaptive signal that would fragment and reassemble across multiple communication spectrums. Each word, each mathematical equation, each philosophical concept would become a weapon more potent than any plasma stream. To the Kraxan Imperium, the transmission began. You arrived expecting a conventional engagement. Mike Rodriguez from engineering worked furiously, weaving multiple layers of meaning into every signal. Quantum communication arrays pulsed with potential. Each transmission carried multiple levels of information, technical data embedded within philosophical discourse, mathematical probabilities woven through poetic descriptions. We are not what you expected, the message continued. We are what happens when a species refuses to accept the limitations others place upon them. Jake Harrison monitored the transmission's impact. The cracks in communication networks began to fracture, unable to process the complexity of the message. It wasn't just information. It was a living narrative that defied traditional computational analysis. Li Chen had integrated an adaptive linguistic algorithm that would make the transmission increasingly complex and incomprehensible to the Kraxan systems. Each repetition would become more intricate, more layered with meaning. Mathematically, the transmission explained, "You calculated our destruction down to the decimal point." But mathematics never captured the human spirit. Captain Thompson felt the entire crew connected through the neural link. This wasn't just a transmission. It was a collective consciousness speaking to another civilization. The message continued to evolve. You see 15 ships. We see 15 opportunities. You calculate probability. We rewrite the equation. You define limits. We discover potential. We are not a species that can be quantified. We are a continuous act of becoming. Each word was a weapon more precise than any physical projectile. The transmission carried technical specifications that would baffle Kraxan engineers. Embedded within were philosophical challenges that would challenge their entire understanding of existence. Our weakness is our strength, the message proclaimed. Our unpredictability is our most powerful weapon. Mike Rodriguez explained to the junior engineers watching the transmission, "We're not just communicating. We're demonstrating the fundamental difference between computational intelligence and conscious adaptation." The transmission began to break down traditional communication barriers. Technical data merged with personal narratives. Mathematical equations transformed into philosophical challenges. The Kraxan communication systems were designed to process pure information. They weren't prepared for human complexity. "We do not seek destruction." The message evolved. "We seek understanding. And in seeking, we transform." Lieutenant Marshall watched the enemy fleet's communication networks dissolve. "They're spending more computational resources trying to understand us than they ever spent trying to destroy us." The final segment of the transmission was its most profound. "Remember this moment, not as a defeat, but as an invitation. There are ways of existing beyond your current understanding. There are potentials you have not yet imagined. We are not your enemy. We are a possibility you have not yet conceived." Captain Thompson looked at his crew. They were no longer just individuals. They were a collective consciousness that had just fundamentally challenged an entire civilization's understanding of existence. The transmission was more than a message. It was a declaration of human potential. The U.S. Defiance arrived at the Galactic Confederation's Central Research Station not as a ship, but as a living legend. Its hull bore the scars of impossible battles, molecular structures that shifted and remembered every moment of its incredible journey. The station's sensors struggled to categorize what they were seeing. Was it a spacecraft? A living organism? A computational network? The answer, they would discover, was all of those things and something entirely beyond. Captain Jack Thompson stood on the bridge, feeling both familiar and fundamentally changed. The neural link had transformed him, transformed all of them, into something more than individual humans. They were now a collective consciousness that had redefined the boundaries of technological possibility. "Incoming reception protocols," Lieutenant Sarah Marshall announced, her voice carrying a note of anticipation that bordered on excitement. Mike Rodriguez from engineering couldn't contain his scientific enthusiasm. "We're about to change everything they understand about technological development," he whispered to Li Chen, who nodded with a knowing smile. The Galactic Confederation had been preparing for humanity's defeat. Instead, they would witness a transformation. Diplomatic protocols crumbled as the Defiance's transmission systems began interfacing with the station's communication networks. It wasn't a traditional data transfer. It was a living, adaptive exchange of information that challenged every existing communication paradigm. Jake Harrison monitored the initial contact. "They can't process what they're receiving," he reported. "Our transmission is simultaneously a technical report, a philosophical treatise, and a complete reimagining of technological potential. Representatives from multiple alien civilizations gathered to witness the arrival. Some approached with caution, others with scientific curiosity. All approached with a fundamental understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. The ship's artificial intelligence, now a complex network that blurred the lines between machine and consciousness, began sharing the mission's details. But it wasn't a simple report. It was a narrative that demonstrated how humanity approached challenges. "We did not survive," the transmission explained. "We transformed." Each moment of the journey was shared not as a linear sequence of events, but as a living, adaptive story. The neural link allowed for a level of information transfer that went beyond traditional communication. Emotions, strategic decisions, moments of doubt, and triumph, all were shared with a complexity that defied traditional information exchange. The Confederation's lead researcher, a crystalline being named Zura-9, approached the ship with a mixture of scientific fascination and philosophical wonder. "You have not just survived," she communicated through complex molecular vibrations. "You have redefined the very concept of survival." Captain Thompson felt the collective consciousness respond. They were no longer just humans who had modified a ship. They were a new form of existence, a living demonstration of potential beyond predetermined limitations. The mission reports became something more than documentation. They were a manual for reimagining technological development. Each modification, each impossible maneuver, each quantum calculation was shared not as a technical specification, but as a philosophy of existence. "Potential is not something that is given," the transmission explained. "Potential is something that is continuously created." Military strategists from various civilizations studied the Defiance's journey. What appeared to be impossible maneuvers were revealed as calculated risks, adaptive strategies that emerged from a collective consciousness willing to challenge every existing limitation. Mike Rodriguez gave a presentation that was part scientific report, part philosophical revelation. "We didn't just modify a ship," he explained to the assembled researchers. "We created a living system of continuous adaptation." The neural link technology became the most studied development in generations. It wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was a fundamental reimagining of the relationship between consciousness, technology, and potential. Lai Li Chen's modifications were particularly fascinating. The molecular reconfiguration techniques developed during their journey promised to revolutionize everything from medical technology to computational systems. "We are not a finished product," the collective consciousness of the Defiance transmission continued to explain. "We are a continuous process of becoming." Years later, military academies would study the mission not as a battle strategy, but as a philosophy of survival. Technological institutes would deconstruct every modification, every impossible calculation. But the true legacy was something that couldn't be easily documented or studied. It was a fundamental understanding that limitations are nothing more than unexplored possibilities. Humanity had not just survived. They had transformed the very understanding of what was possible.